I could give you a long introduction, Joey, but I don't know if you want to do it yourself, if it's on your first slide.
Yeah, no, I'll do. I'm happy to waffle on about myself. Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. Is that all right like that? Cool. Yeah, so this is normally where you will find me, out wandering through some bog or another with my sidekick who tries to eat all of the moss as soon as I try and figure out what it is. I started working in Peatlands professionally in 2019. I did a BSc in biology and a master's in environmental biology at Swansea, and then moved into a job at Lost Peatlands where we did a lot of forest to bog restoration work through the valleys of South Wales. Around the same time I started my own kind of freelance consultancy. I've been doing that ever since. In 2022 I started on my PhD, which is still at Swansea, looking at the carbon aspects of the forest to bog restoration that we did in the valleys. And I just quite recently set up a community interest company with some colleagues called Advenitir. We've got a stall out the front if you want to come and talk to us about that. I'm here in this workshop, I think, with my British Ecological Society committee hat on, as well as my Swansea University hat on, and I'm quite proud to say that I now work for the National Peatland Action Programme for NRW, which is kind of my dream job, really, because I just get to walk across habitats like this all day looking at the fantastic species that we have in Wales. So my research work that I do at the university is based on a network of sites around South Wales. They're all forest to bog sites, and they're all focused on taking areas which were planted with Sitka spruce in sort of the 60s and 70s through a restoration framework into what we hope in the long term is going to be a near natural bog back in good kind of functioning condition. There are 4 sides to the research, which are kind of looking at the 4 different aspects of the carbon properties of the sites that we are able to focus on within the time frame of the research project. So I've got a network of greenhouse gas collars to look at the changes in emissions factors as we move from one condition state to another. I've got a series of rivers which I'm sampling to look at the total organic carbon exports, the amount of peat that's leaving the site in the water. The amount of soil carbon that we have on site under the trees and out in the open areas, and how that changes over time, and then how the vegetation recovery is influenced by the different restoration methods that we use, what we had on site in the first place, and whether there's anything that we can learn about how we're restoring these sites to kind of guide them in a quicker, faster trajectory. So I put just this, it looks a bit like something from Minecraft, I always think, but this is from a game that we developed for an app for our old project, where it tracks your steps, and as you walk across the bog you get to unlock things which restore your bog, including an ecologist that you can control and run around like The Sims. But I like it because it just highlights kind of the scale of the challenge that we were working with. So we're moving from what was a kind of a near natural system to something which looks a bit more like this. And you can see the kind of deep drainage that's associated with the trees themselves, and then kind of more traditional restoration challenges, I suppose, areas of bare peat, and then areas of overgrazing, as well as a few sheep running around in there. And I think just at the top, staring at that drain, is meant to be myself and my colleague trying to figure out what on earth we're meant to do about these sites when we started. The main kind of thing that I'm trying to measure through all of this is the change between, a forested condition state and, a near natural condition state. The main influence we have of the drainage and planting that happened through the 60s and 70s, when these sites went from private ownership and kind of large-scale landed gentry owning the mountains to kind of state ownership for forestry, is that when the drains were put in, the water table fluctuation zone, which is where your water table exists through the year, there was a massive drawdown, and so we ended up with a large section of the peat which was previously in our anaerobic zone and went through one decay pathway going into more aerobic conditions, and going through a different decay pathway, and the balance between the CO2 emissions and the CH4 emissions are what we're trying to understand better as we move from one condition state to the other. And while there's not really much of a driver to plant trees on deep peat anymore, thankfully, what we struggle with a lot in the valleys is finding anything that's in a really great condition to measure, to compare against, is something that has been a bit of a battle in South Wales. And so what we went for was a space for time study design, where we have kind of a network of sites at different points in their trajectory that we can compare against. In terms of kind of challenges and opportunities, this is one of my sites from Lost Peatlands. This is Castellnos over in the Rhondda, which I recommend if anyone has any spare time and you can escape the rain or you want to come back to South Wales. A visit over the Rhondda. 5 of the 6 colonies of sphagnum medium that are found in Glamorgan are found on this site, so it's a nice one to have a wander over. We found them all within the past 5 years, so there's always a chance you can find more, become a local celebrity. These sites and the restoration pathways we put them through are not traditional. They're strange sites with strange challenges, and the restoration methods that we had to use as they were being developed for the first time had their own things that we had to work around as well. So the biggest challenge has been trying to fit these sites into the sort of more traditional peatland restoration framework and figuring out how we measure these things to get a kind of meaningful outcome. But the biggest opportunity that I think I've had through the whole of my career has been things like this, where we then have the kind of infrastructure behind us to take people out with us onto the bog and just talk to people about these places that are right on their doorsteps that they might not necessarily go up to. I think probably the most rewarding thing that has happened to me on site in the kind of however many years I've been doing this is we had one chap come up with us who lived in a village called Glencorrig in the Avon Valley. And he'd lived there his entire life, and he had memories of running up and down the mountain when he was, a child. And then as he got older, and he wasn't able to get out as much, he was on crutches, and he hadn't been up to the top of the mountain for sort of 30 years. And we were able to bring him out on our minibus and get him out to the centre of the bog to stand on, his mountains, essentially. And that is something that's always kind of stayed with me and is kind of a big driver for me to push for more community involvement in everything that we're doing. So that, I think, is me. I'll put that up for Laura as well. But if anyone has any questions, crack on, shout out.
Awesome. Thank you, Jerry. Does anyone have any questions for Jerry? Go for it.
I was just kind of wondering if you might, kind of speak to the starting of your consultancy sort of early career. I feel like a lot of people might look at that and be like, that's sort of a challenging time to sort of take on something like that, and what kind of barriers you might have come across as, or even just really what need you saw to sort of jump into that at that point.
Yeah. When I started my job, I started my Lost Peatlands role, which was my employed role, about a month before I finished my master's. So I was still writing up my master's dissertation as I started this job. And that's probably not the route I would suggest anyone take, because it was one of the most stressful times of my life. But that job was part-time until I needed something to fill the gap. And it was really just a way for me to work with colleagues that I already knew and get out on site and get some more experience. But I needed to have some sort of framework around me so that I had insurances in place, and there was, I was registered with, HMRC, so that when I got money coming in, the taxman wasn't going to turn up and slap me with a massive fine. All of these things were kind of things I had to learn as I went. It wasn't something that was kind of covered in, lectures and things like that at uni, because it's not a kind of normal thing for people to do, I think, is start working as a freelancer immediately out of uni. You normally kind of go into like a consultancy or a public sector role and get trained up a bit. But it was a tricky time. It was right before COVID, and it was just something that I started it, thought I'd do it for about a year or so, and then move on to kind of the more traditional kind of consultancy role. But it's I'm still doing it, so it's worked out all right. And it's also, honestly, I found it kind of impossible to work around the valleys with these communities and not just fall in love with the people and the place, and this has given me kind of the best vehicle to keep doing that. So that's kind of why I keep doing it.
So it's similar but slightly different. You've got like loads of different hats that you wear, sometimes at the same time, sometimes sort of moving on from one another. What have you found like the benefits of being involved in multiple different projects at the same time, or maybe the disbenefits?
The disbenefits is you don't have much of a social life and you don't get much sleep. And I'm 29 and my knees are knackered and I've got grey hairs that are coming in, more and more every day. The benefits are that you cram in a lot of experience into a short time, which is really great. And the benefits of working in the public sector, I find, so through my new role with NRW and my old role with Lost Peatlands was also public sector. We were housed at Nathbeth Harbour Council. Is that there is never a question that you are there to do good and you are there to protect these habitats for the benefit of people down the line and the communities that you're working with. something that I struggle with kind of traditional consultancy work where you're dealing with large-scale renewables or anything like that. So even down to doing bat surveys for people's houses and things, is you're trying to help people as much as you can and protect as much nature along the way, but the drivers for protecting nature is kind of legislative that people need to comply with rather than people wanting to do it for the sake of loving nature. The challenge between, you know, swapping different hats is just you need to be quite regimented with your time, and I plan everything out. I've got days where, you know, Monday to Wednesday I'm in one role and that's all I look at, and then you know, in the evenings I do PhD stuff and I've got a set time for that, and then Thursday, Friday I've got time away from my employed role, and you can book things in then. But the benefit of being self-employed or having your own venture that you set up is you can be quite selective about the work that you take on. And there's been times in the past where there's been work that's been offered to me and to colleagues from people who are, you know, at the opposite end of, you know, their ethics and how they interact with nature to myself and my colleagues, and they offer you a lot of money to come along and say what you want them to say, and to be able to say, no, I'm doing this for myself, and, you know, these are our values and we're sticking to them, is very rewarding. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jerry.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really great to hear a bit about your research and also like how you're blending multiple careers simultaneously.